A dark room, a chair, a window cracked open to let in the cold. On the desk, a broken radio. On the floor, breadcrumbs for pigeons. The man in the bed hadn't moved for hours. Nikola Tesla was dead. No lights left on. No crowd waiting. Just a handwritten note in the drawer, a stack of unpaid bills, and a name misprinted in the next morning's paper. He gave the world electricity, and died with no way to pay for his own. There were no final interviews, no confession, just silence. A silence that didn't begin with death, but had been building for years. He hadn't published in decades. He stopped filing patents. He stopped trying to explain himself. He wasn't forgotten. He was ignored. First politely, then systematically. Until the man who lit entire cities was living in a room without power. And yet, even then, he didn't ask for anything. When someone once asked if he regretted the way it all ended, no recognition, no reward, he reportedly said, "I don't need anything. I live in my head." Maybe he said it, maybe he didn't, but the line fits, because Tesla wasn't chasing credit. He wasn't chasing approval. He was chasing something far more fragile, the future. He built machines the world hadn't asked for. He saw answers to questions no one was ready to ask. Wireless power, global communication, limitless energy drawn from the air. Most people laughed. The rest took what they could and moved on. The patents went to others. So did the money. So did the legacy. And he kept working anyway. Because for him, the idea was enough. The silence wasn't failure. It was the cost. So here's the real question. Not, would you do the same? But this. Why do we live in a world powered by his mind, yet barely remember his name? Who gets remembered, and who gets erased? Tesla never chased history. He left that to others. But now you're here. And this is where his story restarts. The end of the 19th century looked like a carnival made of wires. Electricity was no longer myth. It was marketing. Cities held public demonstrations like magic shows. Sparks flew. Bulbs lit up. Crowds clapped. There were machines that made your hair rise and ones that made corpses twitch. People cheered when animals convulsed under current, just to prove which system was safe. They called it progress. They called it power. Someone even said, pointing at a light bulb in a glass dome, "This is what separates us from the dark." This was the golden age of invention, but only if you understood the rules. Invention was product. Discovery was leverage. Patents were bullets. Thomas Edison knew those rules by heart. He turned invention into empire. He wasn't just building machines. He was building myth. His face appeared in newspapers, in textbooks, in investor meetings. He electrified Manhattan, recorded sound, filmed motion, and he stamped his name on every socket. He knew the secret. It didn't matter if the system was perfect. It mattered who got there first. And then came Tesla. Tall, angular, European, strange. He didn't smile on cue. He didn't speak like a salesman. He didn't want to license his mind. He didn't even seem to notice the room. He brought diagrams that made no sense, ideas with no business plan, machines that didn't hum. They hissed and crackled. He said he could send energy without wires, that power should move like weather, that the earth itself could become a conductor. No pitch, no slogan, just a notebook full of frequencies no one asked for. He didn't stand in the spotlight. He stood beside it, watching the way it moved. While Edison's team posed in front of a lit bulb, Tesla was staring at the field around it. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to interrupt. And in a culture where the loudest man won, silence was almost violence. No one knew what to do with him. He wasn't useful in the way geniuses were expected to be, predictable, promotable, monetizable. He didn't challenge the rules. He ignored them. And in a world where everything had to be measured, claimed, or sold, that made him dangerous. He stepped onto American soil with 4 cents in his pocket, a letter of introduction, and a vision no one could follow, not in English, not in numbers, not yet. But he knew it would work. Edison saw a young engineer with glowing references. "Fix my generators," he said. "I'll give you $50,000. Tesla did it in weeks, rebuilt the system from the ground up, made the impossible look elegant. When he asked about the promised reward, Edison leaned back and smiled. "You don't understand our American humor." Tesla looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I guess I don't," he said, and walked away. No fight, no press, just a quiet exit that cut deeper than a scream. He took a job digging ditches, the kind of work where your hands bleed and your ideas have no place. And while the other men shoveled in silence, Tesla sketched circuitry in the dirt, on lunch breaks, in notebooks, on walls. He wasn't designing a device, he was designing a revolution. He saw what Edison didn't. That energy didn't need to crawl through wires like water in pipes. It could swing, oscillate, amplify. It could move like thought, alternating current. It traveled farther, faster, stronger. It wasn't an improvement. It was a shift. And that shift triggered a war. Edison didn't just disagree. He retaliated. He launched a campaign to destroy AC before the public could understand it. He paid newspapers. He staged lethal demonstrations. Dogs, calves, even an elephant named Topsy were electrocuted in public, framed as proof that Tesla's current was a threat to human life. It wasn't science. It was theater. But it worked. Tesla watched in silence, not passive, just unwilling to descend into spectacle. While Edison held press conferences, Tesla held blueprints. While Edison framed electricity as fear, Tesla framed it as freedom. He wasn't trying to win. He wasn't trying to fight. He just kept working. Transformers, motors, induction systems. His machines didn't just function. They pulsed with a logic that outpaced the market. He never lashed out, never struck back, because he knew the battle wasn't over power. It was over the shape of the future, and in the middle of the noise, he became the quiet force that cracked the system open, not with a weapon, with a wave. He didn't want to control the world. He wanted to design one that didn't need controlling. While others fought over patents, wires, and profit margins, Tesla was trying to pull something out of the air, literally, not as a metaphor, not as metaphorical vision, as hardware, as circuitry, as real physical design. He saw energy like air, like weather, like gravity, something that belonged to everyone because it belonged to no one, and he didn't want to charge for it. He wanted it to pass through us the way wind passes through leaves. Electricity should not flow through meters, he once said. It should flow like light. One day, a journalist asked him bluntly, "But how will you make money if anyone can use it for free?" Tesla paused, then said, "I'm not trying to make money. I'm trying to make a world that doesn't need to be bought." It wasn't a stunt. It wasn't virtue signaling. It was engineering logic. If energy could move through the air, without wires, without infrastructure, it would no longer need to be sold. That terrified the people whose entire empires ran on the billable unit. Edison had patents. Westinghouse had contracts. Morgan had monopolies. Tesla had waves. Wireless power wasn't just an innovation, it was an eraser. A signal that threatened to rewrite everything: economy, geography, governance. He wasn't a utopian. He was precise, practical, patient. He didn't want chaos. He wanted access. His blueprint was a planetary circuit. Earth itself would vibrate with usable frequency. You wouldn't need permission. You wouldn't need to plug in. You'd simply exist inside the signal. It was the kind of idea that didn't need marketing. It needed courage. And the closer he came to making it real, the clearer it became that it wasn't failure the system feared. It was success. He didn't pitch it. He built it. No press tour, no trademark, No price tag, just one man and one tower, trying to give the world something too useful to be owned. And he never once tried to own it himself. He didn't live like a man trying to change the world. He lived like someone already shaped by another one. Nikola Tesla followed patterns the way others followed clocks. At exactly 8:10 p.m., he entered the same restaurant. Always alone. Always at the same table. A pot of milk. 2 pieces of dry toast. Nothing more. 18 napkins used in exact sequence to clean his utensils. He spoke little. He listened to the hum of silence around him. He believed numbers weren't symbols. They were keys. 3, 6, 9. He called them the fundamental patterns of the universe. Not superstition, geometry, architecture of the unseen. His steps were counted, his bathwater measured, his entrances timed. This wasn't eccentricity. It was calibration. At night he fed pigeons in the park. Dozens came, but one, pure white with gray-tipped wings, landed on his palm like it belonged there. He didn't move, didn't speak. He let the weight of the bird settle into his fingers. When she died, he wrote, "Something went out of me that day, like a frequency I would never hear again." And while the world rushed ahead, his tower began to rise. Wardenclyffe. It didn't look like any building. It looked like something left behind, or sent ahead. A wooden stem topped with a metal sphere, rising from the ground like a tuning fork for the earth itself. He believed the planet could resonate, like a string. That energy wasn't something to burn, but to harmonize with. He didn't build it for demonstration. He built it to complete an equation. No cables, no meters, no switches, just transmission through the ground. A planet-wide pulse. Energy, like thought, traveling without permission. He refused to patent it, refused to defend it in journals. People asked, "Why don't you publish this?" He said, "Because it's not ready to be read." They called it madness. He said nothing. Because to him it wasn't a device. It was the end point of a sentence he'd been writing since childhood. Wardenclyffe wasn't a project. It was a ritual in steel. He wasn't trying to prove a theory. He was trying to bring something home. He built the tower, but he didn't sell the plan. Wardenclyffe stood like an antenna from another century, elegant, incomplete, alive. But it was built on a principle the present couldn't absorb: energy without ownership, power without wires, without meters, without control. J.P. Morgan had backed it in the beginning, as long as it ended in infrastructure, as long as it could be built. One afternoon, Morgan asked directly, "How do we charge for this?" Tesla didn't flinch. "We don't," he said. The silence after that was longer than the conversation. Morgan stood. Tesla remained seated. Funding stopped. Materials dried up. Workers were sent home without warning. The tower stood, humming with nothing, like a violin with no hand on the string. The press came next. Headlines turned. Tesla loses touch with reality. Genius or lunatic? Scientist claims to talk to space. The man who once lit up cities was now being called a recluse with wild hair and stranger habits. He didn't fight the story. He didn't explain. His only statement, when asked by a reporter, was this: "The future will know." He moved into a narrow room on the 33rd floor of the Hotel New Yorker. Bed, desk, chair, milk, crackers, napkins, birds. Every day, he fed them in the park. The same white one returned. Every night he sat at the window and wrote equations in the air with his finger, slowly, like someone remembering a song. He no longer rushed to record them. He no longer rushed at all. Sometimes hotel staff heard humming. They assumed it was the radiator. Sometimes the lights in his room flickered, though no one touched the switch. He kept working. On paper no one would publish. On ideas no one would build. He knew it. And still, he worked. People forgot him, or remembered a caricature. He didn't correct them. He no longer needed the world to understand, only to catch up. One January morning, the maid knocked. No answer. She opened the door and found him seated by the window. Still, not collapsed, just done. No notes, no speech, just silence, and a folded napkin on the table. Later, someone claimed his last words were, "Please don't frighten the pigeons." He didn't die angry, or bitter, or broken. He died in the same way he lived, not loud, but aligned. He didn't leave behind a company. He left behind a planet that quietly runs on his frequency. The phone in your hand, the Wi-Fi in the air, the signal that finds you even when you're nowhere near a wire. That's Tesla, not in the branding, not in the credits, but in the architecture. He didn't trademark the future. He spoke it out loud and let it move on without him. Alternating current, wireless transmission, remote control, resonant frequencies. A century ago, they sounded like fiction. Now they're so normal, we forget anyone had to invent them. We say Bluetooth, we say drone, we say smart grid. We rarely say Tesla. He isn't quoted at tech conferences. He's not a business case study. You won't hear him in keynote speeches, but he's there, beneath every socket, every chip, every signal bouncing invisibly through the room. Because he didn't build a company. He built a condition. He didn't sell a platform. He made platforms possible. And that's why you don't see his name. You see what his name made possible. A modern startup puts his name on a car, sleek, fast, electric. But when you ask people who Nikola Tesla was, most pause. Some guess. Few know. They drive his name, but don't recognize the man. That's the paradox. He didn't become a brand. He became infrastructure. While others chased attention, he chased clarity. While others carved faces into stone, he carved blueprints into time. He's not a statue. He's the hum behind the silence, the rhythm of the grid, the pulse in your wall, the charge in your pocket. Ideas usually take on a voice. His didn't. They took on voltage. Quiet, ubiquitous, undeniable. He never asked to be remembered. He became unerasable anyway, because you can forget the name. But the current keeps flowing. He never gave instructions, but the way he lived was a blueprint. Tesla didn't wait for recognition. He didn't collect titles. He didn't slow his thoughts so others could catch up. He moved when the signal was clear, even if no one else could hear it. Most people act when they feel seen. He acted when he felt aligned. He didn't simplify himself to be understood. He didn't round off the edges to fit the frame. He didn't dilute the frequency just to be welcome in the room. And that was the lesson. Not that silence is heroic, but that silence can be the only honest shape an idea can take. Not that rejection makes you right, but that being early feels exactly like being wrong, until it doesn't. Not that you have to resist the world, but that sometimes the world just hasn't tuned in yet. Now look at yourself. You're sitting here. You're watching this. Maybe you've had an idea too strange to explain. A thought you kept to yourself because the room wasn't ready. You're not alone in that. He was there too. You feel that tension between expression and compromise. That pressure to translate what you feel into something others approve. That's where he stood, every day. So here's the formula. If you need one, don't be understood. Be clear. Don't chase acceptance. Chase resonance. Don't lower the signal. Hold it. Because sometimes the world doesn't meet you where you are. And your job isn't to move. Your job is to transmit. And maybe the real work, the lasting work, doesn't echo in applause. It hums, low, unshaken, quiet enough to miss, but strong enough to carry through time. So take a second now. Breathe. No music, no prompt. Just this. Stay with what you know is true, even if no one's listening yet. He never wanted to be remembered. He wanted to be received. And when he wasn't, he kept going anyway. Now look again. A man alone in a room, scribbling formulas in the air, not for show, but because the thought hadn't cooled yet. A tower rising from the ground, half forgotten, half finished, still resonating in the bones of the earth. A folded napkin, a white bird, a hand that didn't move, a city lit by systems he imagined, and a hotel window glowing quietly the night he left. That wasn't a sad ending. It was a transmission. This isn't history. This is a mirror. If you've ever kept something to yourself, not because it wasn't ready, but because the world wasn't, you've stood where he stood. If you've ever felt like your idea made the room quieter, not louder, you've already heard him. If you've ever chosen the long road, the strange one, the one where no one claps but something still says, keep going, then this isn't about him anymore. It's about you. Because Tesla wasn't a myth. He was proof that you can stay aligned even when you're alone, that you can build what no one sees yet, and let that be enough, that you can hold the signal steady, even when it costs you everything. You don't have to be him, but if there's something inside you that's too real to let go of, too early to explain, too quiet to impress, then you're not lost. You're just not tuned in yet. And maybe you're not waiting for the world. Maybe you're just waiting for permission. So here it is. You're not broken. You're not too late. You're not too strange. You're just not switched on. And the signal? It already passed.